Danni Orvelle was the girl who saw too much. Sorel Grimvain was the one who never let it go. One vanished without a trace. The other was found surrounded by walls of disturbing sketches and symbols no one could explain. What started as a missing persons case quickly unravelled into a dark mystery buried beneath the town of Wrenhaven. Where art became evidence, obsession turned into madness, and something far older than both girls began to rise. In the quiet lakeside town of Wrenhaven, 17-year-old Danni Orvelle was known more for her silence than her smile. She wasn't the kind of girl who blended into crowds or stood out loudly. She existed somewhere in between. She had no siblings, no close group of friends, and rarely spoke more than a sentence or two in class. Yet everyone remembered her. Maybe it was because of her hauntingly beautiful sketches. Danni could capture the shape of a person's sorrow with just a pencil. Her sketchbooks were full of unfamiliar faces, some smiling, others distorted with fear or anger, none of them ever labelled. It was as if she drew people from dreams, or maybe from nightmares. On a crisp autumn morning, as the trees rusted into shades of amber and blood red, Danni left her house to ride to school like she always did. She wore her favourite dark green hoodie, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and headphones tucked under her long brown hair. Her mother, Orvelle, remembered watching her leave through the kitchen window while sipping tea. That was the last time she saw her daughter. Danni never made it to school. The absence wasn't noticed until midday, when a concerned teacher marked her missing. Callia was contacted, and panic set in immediately. She knew Danni wasn't the type to skip class. Her daughter hated being late, hated drawing attention to herself. Something was wrong. That afternoon, Callia went out searching. She found Danni's bike near the riverbank about 2 miles from home, left at an odd angle, the tyres caked in mud, one handlebar bent as if from sudden pressure. A few feet away, her backpack hung on a tree branch, not tossed or dropped, but placed carefully, as though someone wanted it to be found. Inside the backpack was her phone, fully charged but powered off, her notebooks, and a half-eaten granola bar. But what chilled Callia to the bone was what wasn't there. Danni's sketchbook. She never went anywhere without it. At home, Callia rushed into Danni's room. The bed was made, clothes neatly folded, but the window was slightly open. On her desk sat one of her older sketchbooks, flipped open. The last page showed something odd. A drawing of a tall black figure standing outside a window, arms long, head tilted, expressionless. The detail was extraordinary, every line dark and deliberate. It wasn't the art that disturbed Callia, but the position of the figure, standing in the exact spot outside Danni's room where her garden grew. Police were called. They did a standard sweep. No signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. The official report suggested she ran away. They cited the open window, the backpack near the river, the phone being turned off. A typical case of teen rebellion. But Callia wouldn't accept it. She insisted Danni wasn't capable of such a thing. She didn't even like staying out past sunset. Her favourite place was her own room, filled with books, music, and paper. She wasn't rebellious. She was anxious, careful, and deeply private. Something terrible had happened, and Callia could feel it in her bones. The search went public within 24 hours. Flyers went up. Volunteers walked the forest trails. boats were sent across the lake. The town came together, but days passed, and nothing new surfaced. No witnesses, no security footage, no strange vehicles reported. It was as if Danni had stepped off her bike and vanished into the air. But one detail kept bothering detectives. Danni's last few sketchbooks, which her mother had stored in the attic, showed a strange pattern. In many of the drawings, a single figure kept reappearing. It changed shape slightly each time, sometimes taller, sometimes distorted, but it was always watching, always nearby. The same black figure from the drawing on her desk. Investigators began to wonder, was Danni drawing someone real, or something she believed was real? Was this a cry for help that no one understood in time? Behind closed doors, the officers began to admit what they didn't want to say aloud. This wasn't just a missing person case. Something darker was unfolding, and Danni Orvelle wasn't just a runaway. She was a missing piece in a puzzle no one yet knew how to solve. 2 weeks after Danni Orvelle disappeared, pressure on the Wrenhaven Police Department intensified. The media had picked up the story, calling it the most mysterious missing persons case the town had seen in decades. With no body, no ransom, no witnesses, and no evidence of foul play, the case sat in a chilling limbo. But then, a tip changed everything. It came from a former student who had once been close to Danni during an after-school program. She said Danni had recently told her she felt watched in school and was uncomfortable around one specific teacher. That teacher's name was Elric Dees. Elric was a quiet, sharply dressed man in his 40s, known for his passion for literature and poetry. He had taught at Wrenhaven High for nearly 12 years. No disciplinary marks, no complaints, at least none that were officially filed. But a deeper look into the school's records revealed that Danni had visited the school counsellor 3 times in the last month, before she vanished. According to brief and vague notes, she spoke of unwanted, attention and feeling unsafe in certain places. She never named names. The counsellor failed to follow up. When asked later, she admitted she didn't take it seriously. Police decided to bring Elric in for questioning. He was calm, composed, and insisted he barely knew Danni beyond grading her essays. But when asked to account for his whereabouts on the morning of her disappearance, his story had small gaps. He claimed he left home at 7:00 a.m. to attend a staff meeting, but no one remembered seeing him until almost 8:30. School cameras showed him entering through the back entrance, something he rarely did. It was enough to justify a search warrant. His home, located on the outskirts of town near a wooded area, appeared tidy and ordinary. But inside a drawer, beneath the floorboards of his study, detectives uncovered a disturbing collection of photographs. Dozens of them. All of Danni. Some she was sitting at the bus stop. In others, walking home from school. Some photos were taken through what appeared to be a zoom lens from across the street. The timestamps spanned several months. The images were organized chronologically in folders. Elric didn't deny the photos existed. He said he was working on a research project, and that he had artistic interest in Danni's posture and presence. He called her his subject, not his student. The language he used was unnerving. He was arrested on suspicion of stalking and potential involvement in her disappearance. The town was stunned. Parents protested at the school gates. Teachers avoided media questions. Elric's face was plastered all over local news. But the charges didn't hold. With no proof that he had made physical contact with Danni or harmed her in any way, and no link between him and the bike or the backpack, he was released after 48 hours. That same evening, while detectives reviewed the case files in frustration, an envelope was dropped off at the Wrenhaven Police Department. No return address, no postage stamp. Inside was a plain black USB drive, labelled in uneven white ink. "It's about Danni." The lead investigator plugged it into a secure computer. What appeared was one single video file, titled simply, "Watch." The footage was grainy and dark. A camera appeared to be set on a tripod. Danni sat in a small, windowless room, her knees pulled to her chest, visibly distressed. Her clothes were the same ones she wore the day she vanished. She looked directly into the camera for several seconds before glancing to the side. A figure stood in the shadows, just out of full view. Only part of a shoulder and a hand were visible. The voice that followed was distorted, unnatural. One sentence played twice before the video cut to black. She shouldn't have drawn it. Panic swept through the station. The fact that the video existed confirmed Danni was alive, at least at the time of the recording. But it also meant something far more terrifying. Someone was watching the investigation closely, close enough to know when the suspect had been released. Someone who wanted to remind them that this wasn't over, and that whoever was responsible had only just begun. The discovery of the video changed everything. Danni Orvelle was no longer just a missing person. She was a victim, held against her will. The footage was silent, except for the single chilling sentence, "She shouldn't have drawn it." Detectives replayed it over and over, trying to make sense of the message. Who was the figure behind the camera? What had Danni drawn that had provoked such a response? And most urgently, where was she now? Forensic experts examined the video frame by frame. Small clues began to emerge. The type of light bulb in the ceiling, the rust pattern on a metal pipe in the corner, the faint sound of water dripping. It was likely a basement or underground space. But that narrowed little. Hundreds of homes in Wrenhaven had old basements. Still, detectives noticed something else. On the concrete wall behind Danni was a symbol drawn in black ink. A crooked circle, with 3 vertical lines through it. The symbol didn't appear in any police databases, but it seemed familiar. That's when one officer remembered something from a set of sketchbooks that had been reviewed early in the case. The same symbol had appeared repeatedly on the margins of Danni's drawings, sometimes subtle, sometimes almost hidden in background details. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Danni had been trying to leave breadcrumbs. There was meaning in her art, but no one had understood it. Not until now. Investigators began combing through Danni's older artwork for connections. Among dozens of faces and strange locations, they found one figure drawn repeatedly. A girl with pale skin, jet black hair, and wide, watchful eyes. She appeared in the background of parks, school hallways, and even Danni's own bedroom sketches. In some pictures, her expression was blank. In others, she looked furious. When Danni was younger, she had a best friend named Wrenhaven. They were inseparable through most of elementary school, often seen walking home together, or sitting under the same tree drawing in their sketchbooks. But in 7th grade, something happened. Sorel transferred schools suddenly, and Danni stopped speaking about her. When asked years later, she would only say, "We're not friends anymore," and change the subject. Few remembered Sorel now. She had become a recluse, rarely seen in town, but the sketches told a different story. Danni hadn't forgotten her. She had been drawing her all along. Detectives pulled up records. Sorel now lived in her family's old farmhouse on the northern edge of Wrenhaven. Her parents had died in a fire years ago, and the house had passed to her. She lived alone, homeschooled herself through high school, and never enrolled in college. The property was large and isolated, surrounded by trees and overgrowth. With a warrant in hand, officers approached. Sorel answered the door calmly. Voice was quiet, her eyes alert. She claimed she hadn't seen or spoken to Danni in years. She said the drawings were probably old memories, that Danni always had a vivid imagination. But as the search began, her tone changed. Her answers became shorter. She grew tense. Inside the farmhouse, the living room was empty aside from a few mismatched chairs and stacks of books. But the back room was another story. It had no windows, and the door was locked with 2 separate bolts. When officers forced it open, they found a space-covered wall-to-wall in Danni's drawings. Pages torn from sketchbooks were taped across every surface. Some had been scribbled over. Others had notes written in red ink. There were markings that mirrored the strange symbol from the video. On the far wall, a hand-drawn timeline stretched across the plaster, filled with dates, locations, and phrases like "she knew," "the watchers," and "circle closes." But Danni wasn't there. In a corner of the room, investigators found a diary. Sorel's. Page after page was filled with obsessive entries about Danni. She believed Danni had drawn something forbidden, something dangerous, and had to be punished. She wrote about visions, about a darkness that followed Danni, about how it would spread if left unchecked. Sorel was arrested immediately. But when asked about the video, she denied everything. She said it wasn't her voice. She didn't know where Danni was. She claimed someone else had sent that USB, and that someone had been watching her too. Sorel Grimvane's arrest made headlines, but it brought no resolution. Despite the disturbing evidence found in her home, there was still no trace of Danni. No physical proof connected Sorel to the video, and nothing suggested she had ever left her property during the time Danni went missing. The basement depicted in the footage wasn't hers. There was no tripod, no camera, and no sign of the black-inked symbol on her walls. While her writings painted her as obsessed and unstable, legally, there was nothing solid enough to hold her beyond the initial charges of harassment and trespassing on Danni's property weeks before her disappearance. Then came another message. This time, it wasn't a video. A package arrived at the Wrenhaven police station in a plain cardboard box with no fingerprints, no return address. Inside was Danni's missing sketchbook, the same one that hadn't been found in her backpack or her bedroom. It had been wiped clean, every page torn out except one. The final drawing showed Danni sitting in the same position as she had in the video. Knees to chest, head turned, looking toward a figure in the shadows. But this version was different. The figure was no longer faceless. It had eyes, bright, white, lidless eyes staring straight ahead. Taped to the back of the drawing was a GPS coordinate. The location led authorities to an abandoned storm drainage system that ran underneath Wrenhaven's outer woodland area. Once used by the town decades ago, it had been sealed off after several cave-ins and structural collapses. But someone had recently broken the lock on the gated entrance. The interior was dark, damp and dangerously unstable. Officers moved carefully, step by step, through tunnels littered with mould, trash, and fragments of what appeared to be clothing. Near the third tunnel bend, they found a message painted on the wall in thick black ink. "You watched, and so did we." Beyond that point, the path narrowed, and it became clear the walls had been scratched. Long, ragged claw marks along the concrete. Whether made by tools or something else, no one could be sure. The trail led to a small side chamber. There, beneath a rusted pipe, was a makeshift bed made of old blankets and pillows. On the ground sat an empty bottle of water, a book of poetry, and a small flashlight, but no Danni. The room had one more detail. Etched into the floor with what looked like a knife was the same crooked circle symbol. Beneath it, carved letters read, "She knew how to see them." Back at the station, analysis of the sketchbook showed the ink used wasn't standard. It contained traces of ash, burnt resin, and another substance that the lab couldn't identify. It was something synthetic, possibly homemade. A mix that didn't match any common art supply. Meanwhile, public panic began to grow. Online forums speculated about secret cults, underground societies, and shadowy organizations. True crime bloggers dissected every frame of the video. They pointed out details police had missed, like how Danni's shadow didn't match her movement in the footage, as though there was more than one light source, or the strange sound frequency hidden beneath the voice, like a pulse, faint but rhythmic, almost mechanical. With every clue came more questions. Who was truly behind the camera? Why was Sorel drawing the same symbols and figures Danni had drawn years before? Could it be coincidence? Or something more? The lead investigator, a seasoned officer named Roland Marek, started going through old town archives, looking for anything tied to the symbols and artwork. What he found was disturbing. In 1982, a girl named Neva Linley had vanished from Wrenhaven under eerily similar circumstances. She too was an artist. She too had filled notebooks with strange figures and symbols. Her last sketch, preserved in the archives, showed a tall, dark figure with the same white eyes. Her case was never solved. Her body never found. She was, 17, the same age as Danni. Marek realized then that Danni's disappearance wasn't isolated. It was part of something older, deeper, something buried beneath Wrenhaven for generations. And now, whatever it was, had returned. Winter descended on Wrenhaven with early snow, covering the streets in a white hush that seemed to mute the panic now gripping the town. Schools installed extra security. Parents kept their children home. Police patrols doubled. Yet, despite the heightened fear, no one had seen or heard anything new about Danni Orvelle. Her face remained on missing posters that had started to curl in the cold wind, and candles still burned on the steps of the school where she once walked. But just as the town began to accept the worst, another message arrived. This one came not in a box, but on the walls of the school itself. One morning, Students and teachers arrived to find the front entrance painted over in thick black ink, the same crooked circle with 3 vertical lines smeared across the glass like a warning. Inside, in the main hallway, dozens of student lockers had been marked with strange numbers and shapes. It wasn't vandalism. It was precise, intentional. Cameras caught nothing. No one had broken in. It was as if it appeared overnight without a single sound. Among the symbols was a phrase written across the hallway floor. She drew the truth, but no one believed her. The school was evacuated. News vans returned. Investigators were left scrambling. Forensics confirmed it was the same synthetic ink found on the last page of Danni's recovered sketchbook. Whoever left this behind had access to the same mixture, possibly even the same source, and now it seemed they were growing bolder. Detective Roland Marek went back to the drawings once again. He examined Danni's early work from before she went missing. Pieces from school assignments, old contest entries, even illustrations she had made as a child. The same figure was always there, sometimes in the background, sometimes hidden in shadows. The pale-eyed silhouette followed her across every stage of her life, even when she was only 9 or 10. That's when he noticed something new. In one of her oldest drawings, a family picnic scene, there was a tree in the background, with initials carved into it, only it wasn't the initials of family members. It was the same crooked circle. That drawing was dated 4 years before she ever met Sorel Grimvain, before she ever spoke of strange dreams, before the visions. This thing, this presence, had been part of her life longer than anyone realized. Marek began investigating the location from that particular drawing, comparing it to real park maps and aerial views. He identified the exact tree, still standing, hidden behind the overgrown remains of Wrenhaven's abandoned Belhurst Park, a place closed down after a series of sinkholes a decade earlier. He went there alone. The park was silent, snow-covered. The old paths and vines had claimed the benches and fences. But the tree was there. The circle was there, fresh, not aged or faded. Beneath it, the ground had been disturbed. Marek began digging with his gloved hands until he struck something hard, a wooden hatch. He called for backup before opening it. The hatch revealed a ladder leading downward into a narrow underground chamber. The air was cold and damp. There were candles melted to stubs along the stone walls. On the far end of the chamber, huddled and shivering, was Danni. She was alive, weak but conscious. She had injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Her hands were stained with ink. She clutched a torn piece of her sketchbook, the final drawing incomplete. When asked who had done this, she didn't speak. She simply handed Marek the page. The drawing showed the school, the tree, the town itself, all wrapped in dark tendrils. At the centre was a cluster of pale eyes watching from beneath the earth. The same symbol hovered above them, glowing. Danni was taken to the hospital and placed under care. But the mystery didn't end there. Within days, Sorel Grimvain was found dead in her holding cell, eyes open, pupils dilated, her final words scribbled on the wall in her own blood. "It knows she's free." And deep beneath Wrenhaven, the crooked circle remained, etched into the stone, pulsing faintly, as if waiting. The truth wasn't just about Danni, It was about what she had seen, what she had drawn, and what was still coming.